Okay, hello. Today we're going to talk about a shame-free approach to healing and creating security within yourself. And we're doing that today with Sami, and she is the creator of Sure Parenting, and she also has a podcast, and that is called Reparenting Realm. And so I just want to welcome you, Sami, to talk about this concept of reparenting to heal yourself and doing it without all the shame and self-judgment. And I'm Erica, host of Powered by Joy podcast. And I just want to welcome you. If you are someone who feels stuck, frustrated, bored, just feel like you can't make change or feel empowered to make change in your life, we're talking about ways to make shifts, get empowered, bring more joy and adventure into our lives. And so that is a big focus on our podcast. So you're in the right place if those are things you want to learn more about. So we're all about finding lots of resources, and Sami is another awesome resource. So, Sami, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much.
And what brought you here into this world of reparenting?
Yeah. So I'm really grateful to be here. I'm so excited to be on the Powered by Joy podcast. Reparenting came to me out of necessity. I found that I had a lot of emotional triggers, things that would happen in my current day life. Instead of reacting at like a level 3 or 5, I would be reacting at like an 8 or 9 or 10. And I could tell that it wasn't quite a right fit, but I had no idea why. And so what reparenting allowed me to do was to create a safety within myself to look at those places that were really hurt and holding wounds from the past and embrace them and accept like, hey, all right, this thing is here. What purpose is it serving? How do I meet you where you're at and help you to heal that thing that has been held on to for so long and give me the space in my own current day life to react to what's right in front of me without the added baggage of the past on top of it. So goodness, I don't even know when I probably started reparenting, to be perfectly honest, but I started doing specifically inner child and inner critic about 4 years ago. And then I did an IFS training, which IFS is Internal Family Systems by Richard Schwartz. And it expanded from just the two to all of the parts. And I found that to be incredibly helpful, absolutely fascinating, and applicable to just about everybody. So I really embraced that style of working with the things that are stuck and still affecting us today. So I've been helping parents for 9 years now. I knew when I became a parent that I wanted to parent differently, but that was about all I knew. And so what that would look like and how I would do that was something I had to build. And I wrote a book actually in 2018 with the building blocks for creating a secure childhood for your children. And part of that is knowing yourself, is really learning about the parts of yourself, what your needs are, how to get those needs met. And then in an effort to, I call that self-honor, and in an effort to help my parents that I was helping with their own journey to self-honor, reparenting became a huge, huge piece of it. So yeah, that's kind of how that developed.
Out of necessity, which is usually how most of it happens, right?
Yes.
Okay. So do you have a background in, do you want to share a little bit about your background
Oh yeah,
that led you up to any of that?
that's probably relevant. So I am a lover of learning. I love all things that I can absorb. So when I was in school, I was studying law actually first, and I felt a draw to working with children even then. But in the legal system, often you're working after something terrible happens, and that wasn't quite a right fit for me. So then I went into teaching, which was also great. But as a teacher, you hear things sometimes from your students, and there was actually a really intense tragedy that happened at our school, and I still felt this like, I need to be closer to the source. Like I need to be helping before these things happen. And so when my oldest was born, he had a lot of needs that I wasn't expecting. And I ended up not going back to teaching and staying home with him. And again, sort of accidentally, found myself in these spaces helping other moms um, with the challenges we were facing, with the things that were coming up for us. And I think that having an education background was helpful because you learn a little bit about the child's brain. I also had taken additional classes in child psychology and child development anyway, because it was fascinating to me. And then I was doing a lot of study on all of the history of parenting and how it has shifted over the years, and the roots of some of the beliefs that were held and passed on generation to generation, because I was deconstructing a lot of that. And I was like, that feels wrong. Where did that come from? Because that's how I approach the world. And so as I was doing that, I ended up being needed in an early childhood setting. So I completed an early childhood certification as well. And it really confirmed everything I had been studying. It was like, yeah, these little people with these little brains, they're incredible. And they are working so hard to learn how to human. And they are not doing things out of malice. They're doing things out of inexperience. They're doing things out of trying to get their needs met with very immature little bodies and brains. And so getting to put that into practice with 2 and 3-year-olds was a really fun experience professionally. And then that fed into the Sure Parenting business as I was working with parents with 2 and 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds and all of the above. So formally, I guess I have the education degrees. In addition, I've done a lot of study into child development, child psychology. I have I did a training out of the University of Texas, which was trust-based relational interventions. Like I said, I did the IFS training, done lots of different trainings because I love to learn. So to be perfectly clear, because I always want to clarify this, I am not a therapist. I do not therapize. I am a coach. There's a difference. There's a distinction that it's important to honor, because I will not diagnose somebody. I will not treat a specific diagnosis. I help people who are looking for tools that they can use for themselves to learn those tools and apply them to themselves. So.
Amen. Well, it sounds like there's some passion in your voice when you talk about all of this, and it's so fun to hear how people are led into different work when they follow that curiosity and that passion, how you end up right where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So you kind of talked about it. Is there like a more scientific way of explaining like exactly what reparenting is?
Mm-hmm.
And, like what are the signs that you would benefit from that kind of work?
Absolutely. So reparenting is a really cool practice that we have the ability to use. So scientifically, the reason that reparenting works is because of a concept called neuroplasticity. And what that essentially means is that the brain can change. When we are growing up, we are very easily able to absorb the world around us. And our brain is desperately trying to figure the world out. The thing that brings us safety and comfort is the ability to predict little predictions over and over again. And that means that we're trying to put the world into categories. We're trying to understand, how do I get my needs met? How do I stay safe? How do I have connection? How do I have belonging throughout our childhood? Sometimes we learn things that were strategic when we were younger, but end up being harmful to us and our ability to have healthy boundaries or to say no or to be authentically who we are as an adult. And it can leave us feeling incredibly anxious, just showing up, having a voice, having an opinion. It can leave us having what Pete Walker in Complex PTSD, that's a phenomenal book, by the way, calls emotional flashbacks, where we are in a situation And I was kind of describing this was my experience where, yeah, this is annoying, this is bothersome, but like it's probably like a 4 or 5 out of 10. Like that's where I maybe should be reacting. But I'm at like a 10 out of 10. I had a client say to me last week, I don't even know I'm at a 10 until I'm at a 12. That's such a great representation. Like it surprises even you. And that tells me there's more reacting here than just this surface issue. And that is not a criticism. That is not a judgment. That is a human reality. We all have experiences like that. And there's nothing to feel shameful about because this is an opportunity. This is our process of going, hey, I'm reacting in a way that doesn't quite feel aligned for me. So, what can I learn about this reaction? What is this reaction teaching me and telling me so that I can meet my own needs where they maybe weren't met in the past? And I can relieve this extra burden, because what our brain will do, why this happens, this emotional flashback happens, is that when we're young, it doesn't have to be young, that's just the work I really work with, so that's the language I'm using. When we get completely overwhelmed by a situation and we have no safe adult to process with, our brain will go, too much, and put it in a box. And that box will get put on a shelf in the back of our mind. But our brains always want to heal and our bodies always want to heal. So later, sometimes 20 years later, something will happen that has a similar vibe. And our amazing brain is like, ha ha, look at this pattern I just recognized. Here, let's bring this back out because maybe this time it can be processed. Maybe this time you can learn something from this, or you can do something different with this. So now we're dealing with at least 2 situations instead of just the one. And again, we feel kind of overwhelmed. If we add shame onto that, we feel really overwhelmed. If we can take the shame out of it and become the observer of what is happening and use that as data, as information, as recognizing that there are parts of us that want to help us and want to protect us and want to shield us, want to empower us, it all becomes functional in its own way. Each part has a purpose. And so instead of, I just shouldn't act that way, we go, how is acting that way protecting me? How else can I protect me? Right? And then we have options instead of hating ourselves. Mm-hmm. So people who find emotional reactivity in their life that doesn't seem to fit the circumstances, because there's something to be said for, feeling depressed after you lose a loved one. That makes sense. This is sad. You're allowed to feel sad. This isn't to erase emotions. Actually, emotions are amazing. They're great things. We should feel all of our feelings. They all have a message for us. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel sad. This isn't to erase emotions. This is that very distinct place where the emotion is right, but it's really intense. And it makes it hard to think clearly. And you would like to be able to parse apart what is the past talking and what is the present talking. Because the present, probably we could just resolve that. That past needs its own special attention. That's where the reparenting comes in.
Perfect. Yes. In my episodes, I use a little different language, but for me, it's, when you're feeling like you're at a level 10 and you're like, wait a minute, this should probably be like a level 2, like it's not the end of the world, but my body's reacting like it is, like I'm in massive danger, like using that as my cue to get curious and go, what's going on here? Because again, I was same thing as like, okay, that after the fact, I'm like, no, that didn't seem quite right. So I love that you put some language to it specifically, and teaching people to kind of work with that as a cue. Like instead of fighting your body on what it's telling you it wants to eat, or your emotions telling you there's something going on here, I used to fight that and like put it away even more, where now it's like, oh wait, this is actually me, my inner knower, trying to help me.
Yes.
Something. So so what would you say are some obvious cues that you might be, not you specifically, but other people listening might go, I could probably benefit from this?
Yeah. So when we're experiencing intense emotion, it can be really helpful to just put your hand on your heart or somewhere in your body and go, how old do I feel right now? Many times we don't feel our age. I'll be 37 this year. And there are times when I'm reacting, and if I do that, I'm going, oh, I'm 12. And this is not a judgment and criticism. See, because I work with sure parenting, right? In my world, we respect children, and there's nothing wrong with being 12. That's not an insult. That means that at 12, something went unprocessed. And that's okay, because we can process it now. And so then I will recognize this is a younger part that is coming up and who, hasn't been seen and heard in all of this time. And they're like, no, I will be heard now. And so their strategy, that part's strategy to be seen and heard is often, looking outward at a person being like, hey, you should see me. You should hear me. What really can only meet that need now is for me to see that part, right? It's for us to meet those needs that weren't met. When we're children, our parents have the opportunity to meet those needs for us. Once we become adults, the only person that can fill those gaps is us. And I do think that most parents give us what they can. And most parents did not have access to all of the things that we currently have access to. So there being a gap doesn't mean you had terrible parents. Now, you are entitled to your own feelings. If you feel angry, if you feel bitterness, resentment, if you had to go non-contact, that can also be valid. But I find a lot of people have a very hard time owning that there's a gap because they don't want to be disloyal to their parents. And I'm saying you can do both. You can love your parents, you can appreciate what they did for you, and go, they didn't have this tool to give me. I'm going to give it to me now.
Yeah. That was my next question is like, can this be generational? Like,
yes.
Being someone who, this kind of work, is it being passed down? And so you're kind of touching on that.
Yeah, well, and it can be generational without even anybody knowing. Some of the things that I've been really fascinated by recently, I don't know who to credit this original quote to, but it was, just because my mother didn't break all the generational curses doesn't mean she didn't break any. And I have a client right now who is in her 60s, and it has been so fascinating to hear the things that her mom was very consciously like, I will not do this. My mom did this and I hated it. And so she broke that one, right? And then because of life and circumstances and other things, a bunch of them got passed down to mom, who's my client. And she went, I am not going to do these 3 things, right? And then her child didn't have that burden, right? So I'm getting to see this really unique spectrum because she has adult children. And it's incredible to see that in real time. I think that we often are really focused on our own experience, which is fair and we should be. But as a coach, I get to work at each level. And so that's a really cool thing to witness. And we will have gaps with our own children. Please hear me when I say there is no such thing as a perfect parent. You will not get it all right. I will not get it all right. I've studied this for 12 plus years after my degree. We will not get it all right. And we will get a lot of it right because we are putting in the work and the effort and the intention. And our kids see that. And so whatever gaps we also create, because we're human, they will have the tools to go, hey, here's a gap, and I know what to do with it, right? We're also passing on that legacy. We're giving them that knowledge and that skill set by doing this work for ourselves. And that gives me a lot of hope. So yes, the traumas can be generational and they can be passed down, but so can the healing.
Yes. I believe that when you do that work, it goes backwards and forwards. And listening to you talk, I'm just like, when you said just 2 or 3, like that mom was like, okay, these are the things I didn't like. And I was like, oh my gosh, I remember having those exact thoughts. And I'm like, so I just quickly, while you're talking, I was like, oh yeah, I can see the generations, like what they're like. There seems to be like a top couple rule important things that have, so, oh yeah. So I just have my own little aha there, like, wow, okay. It does, we each probably do choose just a few things, not to break all the generational energy and ties and habits. And it makes sense that we're probably going to just have a few really good ones that we nail.
Right. And I think that currently, because there is so much social media and there's so many opinions and there's so much exposure to ideas out there, that's a good thing. And it's really hard because it can feel like every time you log on, there's somebody telling you you're not doing enough, you're not doing it right, you're not doing, a good enough job. And I tried really hard to remind parents, you probably are. If you're scrolling through parenting TikToks, trying to implement tools and resources, like thinking about how your reaction might have impacted your child, going back and repairing with them, you're probably doing good enough, actually, right? The standards for parenting were never perfection. They never have been. They never will be. Our children do not need to be bubble wrapped in perfection. It would hinder them because our children aren't perfect. Anybody who's ever parented or ever been around a child knows they cannot be perfect all the time. That's not a thing, right? What on earth would it be like to grow up with an actually perfect parent, to never see humanity mirrored to you, to never see what it looks like to make a mistake and repair, to never see that you're worth repairing with? That's not a good, healthy thing, actually, right? So our kids need us to embrace our own imperfection. And that doesn't mean that, and I don't think I even have to say this, but I will. It doesn't mean we don't give a crap and we just, treat them however and they deal with it, right? That was several generations back. We don't do that no more. But it does mean that we give ourselves permission to focus on repair. We're going to be human. We're going to make mistakes. The gift of repair cannot be understated. It is not conflict-free that makes a good relationship. It is having conflict. It is having a rupture and then having the relationship mean enough for the two people to come back together and repair. That is what creates the security. This relationship can handle our feelings. This relationship can handle our bad moods. This relationship can handle our mess ups. That's a secure relationship. And reparenting lets you build that with you.
I'm getting chills. Sorry, I'm just like, so many thoughts going in. Like, you're just putting things into words that are very powerful to hear, because I think we do hold ourselves to, most of us that really are out there trying, doing our best, we do hold ourselves to these standards of what we think everybody's doing or, being. And, that no matter how good you try or how perfect you try to be, that like we're human beings mess up and make mistakes and have emotions. And like, for me, it's been like trying to figure out how to be in a space where we can be graceful or gracious and like, and have compassion and giving that grace inside that relationship. And so it's like, okay, how do we turn that to ourselves?
Yes.
Because it's so easy to do, for others, that we love. So like,
well, and you mentioned like cues, and that's one too. When you're looking at outside of yourself going, man, she does it perfect, or she does it better than me. Any of those shoulds, that is your inner critic talking. And I know several years back, the kind of approach with inner critic was to fight back. It's like, you shut up, F you, I'm the boss here, right? And I get it. And what I've found to be more productive long-term is to link arms with that inner critic and go, hey, I hear you. You're using a lot of big language, using a lot of shame. That's your strategy. But what's your goal? What do you think will happen? What if I don't do all of the handcrafted, Pinterest-worthy creations with my kids? What are you afraid will happen? Right? And oftentimes you relate. The critic is like, you won't be good enough. They'll resent their childhood. They'll think you didn't care about them. Okay, so you have a good reason. Your strategy, though, isn't moving us forward. Let's give you a new strategy, right? So what I found is my inner critic has been able to largely shift into more of an advisor role. Instead of you suck, you're not doing enough, it goes, is that something you should be doing? And I can handle that question, right? Right now we see a lot of like things that are like, summer projects or activities you must do with your kids. And I have to remember, this is marketing, this is social media, everybody wants clicks and likes and whatever. And that means they have to speak in absolutes. Your kids will be fine if they are playing with dirt and sticks and grass, if they are not doing some perfectly curated activity that you had to spend 6 hours making. Kids are happy to create and make believe and invent. And sometimes in our effort to make it quote unquote perfect, we're ignoring what we're actually taking away from them, right? So when my inner critic now sees something like that and is like, my first thought, actually I saw one was, I'm too lazy for that, which is a criticism, which is an inner critic word, right? And I'm like, is it lazy, or is it that I choose to prioritize my energy differently? So I have this little mini conversation with myself, and then I go from judging myself to accepting myself really quickly, like a teeter-totter. I choose to let my kids play how they want to play outside, right? Is it a cool, cute activity? Sure. But I would rather spend my time differently, and that's okay. We get to make those choices. We have the right and the autonomy in our own families and our own homes to make those choices. And that doesn't make you wrong if you love to curate the perfect activities and build things out. And like, if that brings you joy, our children getting to see us joyful is a huge gift to them. So if it brings you joy, you do go all out. Do it, Mom. And if it makes you feel bitter and resentful and judgmental of yourself, it's not worth it. It's really not.
And I feel like the kids pick up on that too.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
And especially because, as anyone who has kids probably knows, whatever expectation we make in our head, they're likely not going to live up to it. So we spend 4 hours crafting this whole, like, I don't even remember what it was. It was like some sort of, I think it was like an obstacle course, and she like made all these stations. It was so cool. But like, my prediction is my kids would not go through all of those things. They'd probably just be like, ooh, water balloons. Cool, we'll do that. And I'm like, but I made the whole thing. And they're like, like that's how I imagine that going. So I don't want to spend my energy there. And when we embrace our own right to say no, and our own right to have boundaries, and our own right to decide where we invest our energy, we actually give our children the power to do the same thing. We give our neighbors the power to do the same thing. We get to say, hey, that's really, really cool. That's actually great for you and your family. And I can embrace that for you and not take it on me as a judgment and a criticism of what I should be doing. Should is a pretty good indicator that maybe we should explore this a little longer.
Okay, so should's the key word. Oh my, yeah, no shoulding all over yourself, right?
Correct.
So do you find that you have what is like a common client? Are you talking to certain age ranges the most, or men or women or parents or people that aren't even parents yet?
Actually, all of the above. Okay, so my most common is moms in their late 20s to early 40s. That's my most common.
Okay.
As I mentioned, I have one client who's 65. I have one client who's a teen mom. I have had a couple dads. It is typically that kind of age range, but there's definitely outliers. I also have clients that don't have kids, but they are looking at their inner child and how to build security with their inner child. And that is its own type of parenting. That's why it's called reparenting.
Yeah.
And so in that context, we generally refer to it more as life coaching. than parent coaching. It just makes a little more sense. But what we end up typically focusing on tends to look very similar because there's still this inner child that is craving the same needs that our children crave. Because we were that child. And sometimes it's even becoming aware of the needs that weren't met. That's one of the things that's a little bit complex, is that most of my clients, I will say, very intentionally are parenting so that their children don't experience the traumatic childhood that they did. That is the most common experience I have. Every once in a while, it'll look a little different. And it'll be somebody who doesn't really look at their childhood as traumatic, but still has some of these anxiety responses or really strong inner critic voice, or, really afraid to be seen or have an opinion experiences. And it almost feels like a mismatch. They're like, I don't know what's wrong with me, is something I hear a lot. And what comes to mind is this whole world of emotional needs, and that this is really the first generation that's talked about it, this generation of parents. Prior to this generation really putting a lot of time and energy into the emotional needs of their children, and seeing them as emotional beings with like valid feelings, though sometimes quite dramatized, because that's what development does to you. We really weren't considering children's feelings to be real things. Like 200 years ago, it was actually considered a sign of will that needed to be broken for a child to have feelings. So we've made progress regardless. But most parents these days had parents whose needs were not met emotionally, and who therefore didn't have the tools or the skills to meet their children's emotional needs. And that leaves us with these gaps that are very hard to pinpoint, because it's not a thing that happened to you. You don't have a memory of some traumatic thing. There was just this lack, this empty, this thing that just didn't happen. That is a lot harder to figure out, to parse apart. There's a phenomenal author. Her name is Dr. Jonice Webb, and she has 2 books that I'm aware of. One is Running on Empty, and one is Running on Empty No More. And after like 10 years in clinical practice, she coined this term, childhood emotional neglect. And she categorizes parents into 12 or 13 categories, from, addicts to workaholics to different things. But the biggest category is actually parents who just didn't have the skills to give. They didn't, it wasn't given to them. They didn't have it to give. They are well-meaning. They loved you. They loved you. They literally didn't know how to sit with your emotions. They didn't know how to handle big feelings, because nobody handled theirs. They were taught, don't feel that. So that's all they had to give you. And then you get into adulthood and you feel like you're a burden. You feel like you're too much. You feel like, you don't want to bother anybody. You don't want to ask for help, these kinds of things. And you're like, it doesn't make sense. My parents love me. They clearly love me. Why am I like this? And it doesn't require a finger pointing or a blame. It's just going, oh, okay, I have a gap. I need somebody to sit in my big feelings with me without getting overwhelmed. It's not something my mom could do. Fair enough. But it is something I can learn how to do. And I'm going to do that now. And we start to give ourselves those things that we didn't get in childhood, or maybe didn't get consistently enough, or maybe there was really just one big instance that shifted your trust in that process, and you rebuild that trust with yourself. Usually it's not one thing. And I want to clarify that, because I hear, like, as soon as I said it, I see parents going, oh my God, I remember that one time. It's almost never one time. If you mess up, if you completely lose your cool, if you're absolutely out of character, your kids know your character. They know how you actually normally are. So when you are able to regulate, you go back and you repair. You're like, hey, I don't like how I acted. I know you don't like how I acted there. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve somebody to be kind to you. Even if I'm frustrated, that's my job, to take myself away and get a break until I can calm down. And children are remarkably forgiving. Remarkably forgiving. But most of the current parents never had been apologized to in their life. So it often wasn't something they knew how to do, right? So we have all the videos and all the reels and all the books and all the things teaching us how to repair with our children. And I love that. And we get to have grace for the fact that this is a learned skill. We're not going to be perfect at it. We're going to try and fumble, and then we'll try again. Because our kids will give us another opportunity to get annoyed. Right? I guess I see all of these things that a lot of people see as really negatives. I see them as opportunities. You know, when we act out of character, what a beautiful thing it is that there's a part in us that knows our true character and knows, hey, that's not you. That guilt, that like, ugh, I can't believe I did that. How incredible that your body is signaling to you that that is not who you are, that that's out of alignment. It is calling your awareness forward so that you can go fix it. I think that's beautiful. Like, it completely transformed my relationship with guilt. All guilt means is that was out of alignment. And if I am feeling unnecessary guilt, I can go, where was I out of alignment? And if the answer is nowhere, then that guilt is not appropriately placed.
Okay. So at that moment, when you realize that, what is that next step? If you're like, oh, that wasn't appropriate timing for me to be feeling this guilt, what do you do?
So I developed a pattern, a strategy of codependency growing up, and it worked well and it served its purpose. And then as I became an adult, I was like, hey, I should learn a different strategy. And that is one of my cues for that. And so I will go, okay, so in an effort to control how somebody else feels, I'm trying to assert all the blame to me so that I can fix it, make it go away, control it, whatever, right? And if I can recognize that, I can undo that. I can go, oh, okay, what part of this is actually mine? I did say that. Is that something I agree with? Am I uncomfortable because they disagree with me? Because they have a different opinion? Oh, you betcha. I still do not love when people don't like me or disagree with me. And yet I am on the internet, so that's bound to happen. And it's okay to feel uncomfortable feelings. All feelings are okay. So maybe I'll just sit with that and go, hey, you know, for a while, you had to be really careful who you ticked off. It could be really dangerous for you. At this point, in your 30s, is anything really going to happen? Or is it just going to feel uncomfortable for a little bit? Right? And so we're going to sit with that uncomfortable. I'll just sit with you. You're not alone. And I'll sit with whatever part that is. Sometimes it's a 7-year-old or so. That's just like, oh my gosh, 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 oh my gosh. I'm like, I know. I remember that. I remember that so well. I believe you that feels really scary. I also believe you and believe in you that you're going to get through this. And I believe you and I believe in you is kind of a catchphrase that I use a lot. I use it with clients. I have clients use it with their children. I have clients use it with their inner children, because that is that balance of validating the emotions and also empowering that person to move forward. And so doing that for yourself, what happens in our amygdala when we sense threat is you get this little warning bell, right? And when you've been through traumas, whatever they are, your amygdala gets a little more sensitive and a little more sensitive and a little more sensitive. So it'll start firing off at things that are fairly benign. Every time that you listen to that anxiety and you hold yourself back, you don't do the thing, you don't say the thing, whatever it is, it goes, oh, okay, saved your life there. Good, good. even if it was something as simple as like going into a store. So it's cataloging all of these things as the same level threat. And the only way that I know of that we can, probably not the only way, an effective way that I know that we can help our amygdala turn down the dial is to face some of those threats and live the experience of you didn't die, right? We walk into the store and we feel that flooding of anxiety of warning, 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 warning. What are you afraid of? What do you think's going to happen? I'm right here in my body. My feet are on the ground. You can do the top 5 I see, 5 things I see, 4 things I hear, 3 things any of those things, to just stay with it. And your amygdala goes, oh, wait, we didn't die. I'm going to take that off the list of death threats. Right? And the more that you do that with the things that you can, because some things are worth being afraid of, but some aren't. And the more that you do that and you go in and you let your body feel it and you stay with it, you let your amygdala go, oh, I thought that was a death threat. We avoided it like it was a death threat. But now that I've lived it, it actually wasn't a death threat. Okay, cool. Now I'm learning, because the neuroplasticity lets our brain continue to learn forever and ever and ever.
Yay. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. So there isn't like a day or a date or like age where it's like, yeah, you've missed the mark. It's not
No.
going to work for you. You can
Yeah.
always do
You
this
can
work.
always do this work. It's my favorite thing about it. I will say the youngest I've ever had do it was an 8-year-old. He had been bullied at 4 at a multi-age school system program. And these older boys, when he was 4, they were 9, they had kicked him in between his legs. It really hurt him. It made him really sad. It made him very scared of school. And he was remembering this at 8, and he was telling his mom about it. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, I wonder if he wants to reparent this. Like, what do you mean? And so for a kid, it's very different language. But the premise was, what if you imagine that you today, this age, this guy right here, who's way stronger and way tougher, goes back to that little boy when he was 4, what would you do? And he told me, and he was like, I would tell them, back off, you can't hurt him. I was like, yeah, and you're strong now, and you can tell them that. He's like, yeah, and I'll make them. I was like, that's right, because you can protect him now. Nobody's going to hurt him ever again. And then he used a bunch of swear words, because little kids will let their feelings out with swear words, same as we will. He's like, they're a bunch of, called them names. And I was like, yeah. And you're just with them. You're in this moment. And then he's like, he felt so empowered. He felt so much better. And he was just like I felt like I got my power back, right? He doesn't use that language. But that was the feeling of it, right? He rewrote the ending of that story. Instead of being a little kid who couldn't do anything, who felt helpless and powerless at the end, he got to be the one that was powerful. He got to be the one that told the bigger kid to stop and actually was able to do something about it. And claiming your power back like that is tremendously powerful. And so, I didn't talk about inner child or inner parts or anything, but it was this rewriting of the end of the story. And it was very helpful for him. He hasn't mentioned it again. That was probably 4 months ago. And he used to mention it pretty typically. And if he did, we'd retell the story, because that's the thing. Kids process things through play and through stories, and their brains aren't fully developed yet. Our full brain keeps developing until we're like 26. So when people are like, my 8-year-old should know, I'm like, I have news for you. But what one of the things that happens is our right and our left brain connect. And with little kids, you can help them make that connection by combining the emotional story with the logic of a timeline. What happened first? Then what happened? Then what happened? Then what happened? And then what happened? And you go all the way till you reach a conclusion. And the reason that I'm telling you this is because when you are working with a part who's 4, you might actually have to use this tool. You might have to go, oh, I hear you. That's so, so scary. Tell me more about that, right? And they're stuck right in the thing. Maybe it's something like a car accident, right? And they're like, and it was big and it was loud and it was so scary. And now as an adult, you're like, I can't even get in the passenger seat of a car, right? I can't do it. Now, there are therapeutic techniques for PTSD. You can do EMDR. There are things you can do. I'm not suggesting you don't do those.
Yeah.
If you are currently in a state where you would like to do something for yourself and see how far you can go with yourself, that's what I'm referring to. I'm not saying to not do other clinical approaches. And in fact, you probably could. But in this instance, if I'm talking to a 4-year-old part, I want to hear like, where are they stuck? Because then I'm going to ask them what happened after that. And it might be all the way until you got home from the hospital, right? But to a point where it's concluded. Because most little kids get stuck on that one point. They have a really hard time moving to the end of it. And so they're looping and looping and looping and looping on that one bad thing. But when you think about it, it's like, oh, and then the policeman got me out of the car. What did he look like? I don't know. He was big. Yeah. Was his clothes kind of scratchy? Yeah, they were scratchy. Right. How did your body feel when he was holding you? Right. Well, like a baby, like he was carrying me. Oh, okay. Do you think you felt safe? Maybe. Right. But then I felt scared because we were in that stupid truck. Fair enough. Right. You're in that truck. Where was the truck going? I don't know. It was really loud. Loud can be hard. And your mom wasn't there? No, I didn't see her. Okay. Well, then what happened? Well, then we had all the doctors. I don't like the doctors. Probably not. They were like poking you and prodding you and stuff. Yeah. And they still wouldn't let me see my mom. Right. And then what happened? Well, then after that, I heard my mom yelling, "Where's my son? Where's my son?" Like, really? Where was she? Where was she? She was outside of the doors. And then what happened? Well, then she came in. And then what happened? And she gave me a big, big, big squeezy hug. Oh, so you got your mommy back. Yeah. What happened? Well, then she took me home. Yeah. Were you so happy to be home with your mommy? Yeah. What did you guys do? We sat on the couch and we watched cartoons and we drank hot chocolate. Oh, that sounds like a good ending. Right? So you can feel the difference where it comes to a conclusion. And I think that the reason we loop on the hard part is because that's the part where we felt overwhelmed. Right? And so our brain is still trying to figure out a way through that. And often these strategies that we use in real time with real 4-year-olds, we can use with ourselves and our 4-year-old parts. And it like all applies. And we get to give them that conclusion. And sometimes, here's the thing, I'm fully aware that there are a lot of stories that don't seem to have happy endings. Okay, I get it. Sometimes the happy ending is that 30 years later, this energetic presence showed up next to you and sat with you and bore witness to how much that situation hurt and told you you're never going to be alone again. Sometimes you are the happy ending, even if it took years to get there.
Wow. You can be that.
Yeah.
You can be the healing, happy ending to the story. Wow. Sorry, took me another journey here. So, okay. So what would be first steps if someone wants to start this work? I feel like you really kind of touched on a whole bunch of things people can do. Well, let's just say someone's recognizing they're struggling with this. Like, is there, an obvious first place for people to start?
Yes. So I have 2 answers to this. One, I'm going to plug myself. The Reparenting Realm is walking you through beginning this journey. Each episode has a little assignment at the end, so you can really start. It's brand new. I just started it because I feel like parts work should be accessible to everybody. So that's one answer. The second is to notice. Practice the skill of noticing. I personally prefer a journal. If you are like, you could not pay me to write this stuff down, all right, fine. We all are different. Notes app, like a voice collector, I don't know. I mean, maybe you can just do it in your head, but I find it to be a lot more effective if I have evidence of what I've noticed, if I can show my brain, look at all these things I've noticed, right? And so one is to actually just notice what you're feeling. It sounds so basic, but it is a type of mindfulness that most of us whose feelings were ignored or overridden, we kind of lose touch with that skill set. And coming back to that part of ourselves where those feelings are allowed to just exist, it empowers us to begin this work. Another would be to notice when you hit a 10 and you're like, oh, what happened there? Right? Getting curious, getting out your Sherlock's Holmes magnifying glass and being like, what were the parts at play here? What did I see? In my podcast, I mentioned picking apart. A lot of people have a lot of familiarity with the inner critic. So they might start with that part and they might just put a star on a sheet every time they notice the inner critic says something that day or that week or that whatever. And this isn't to judge you or shame you or criticize you or even shame that critic. It's just the skill of bringing awareness back to ourselves. And with that skill, we're then able to go, okay, now that I see the inner critic is popping up 50 times a day, I'm going to see if I can notice any of the words that the inner critic is saying and write some of them down. You're lazy. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to F everything up. What's wrong with you? Right? Those kind of things. And then I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to pick one and go, if I assumed that there was some positive intent behind these harsh words, what would that be? What's your goal? What are you hoping happens? You're saying, I don't know anything. I'm going to mess everything up. What are you trying to protect me from? Or what do you think is going to happen after you say that? Right? Well, if you don't go out there and start talking, then you're not going to say anything wrong and then nobody's going to judge you. Okay, so you're trying to protect me from judgment, from other people like hurting me, hurting my feelings. I can appreciate that. And I'm curious, how old do you think I am? Because many of these protectors, this is very much an IFS concept, many of the protecting parts were formed when we were very, very young. And they are focused on that part that they are protecting, that little inner child. So when you say, and I again do this in writing, partly because I like to write, but partly because it activates extra neurons in your brain to put pen to paper that are not activated when you're just thinking. So I'll write, how old do you think I am? And it might be like, I know you're 3. I see the challenge. Because yes, if a 3-year-old was getting on the internet and speaking their mind, that could be actually very dangerous. I'm 36. I'm about to be 37. So what does that tell you? What's different with me being that age? And it's like, oh, maybe you can handle that. Like, right, maybe I can make that choice for myself. Maybe I can choose to accept that risk. Right? And sometimes I will have a little what if monster. What if this? What if that? What if this? What if that? And I have 3 strategies for what ifs. Let's see if I can remember them. They're on a worksheet somewhere. Number 1 is to just answer the what if. What if somebody criticizes you? What if they do? Then they will have said something nasty in a comment. I will likely feel anxiety in my body, and I will feel it until it dissipates, and then I will move on with my day. If it's really nasty, I'll probably block them. Okay. All right. So just answering it. Another one is to follow the what if, right? So it's sort of this like rabbit hole concept to the worst possible outcome and then bring it back around. So in this instance, what if somebody criticizes you? I don't know. What might happen? Well, what if they say that you don't know what you're talking about and you're an idiot, and then they call the state of Idaho and they try to close your business, and your family can't pay their mortgage, and you end up homeless. Okay. So if I do a podcast interview, I'm going to end up homeless. Because when you pair the first part to the second part, it starts to sound ridiculous, right? It's like, well, no. Oh, okay. So now this is diffused. And then the third way is to just flip it over like you're going to flip a coin. What if somebody criticizes you? What if somebody compliments me? What if somebody says you don't know anything? What if somebody is like, holy crap, this is so helpful, right? Our brains have a negativity bias. They need to look for threats. But we can also look at positive outcomes because those can happen too, right? It's just as likely, sometimes more likely, that the what if on the positive is going to happen. So why not give it that some attention? And those are my 3 different ways I handle what ifs. In my body, it feels a little, the critic is like attacking me, whereas the what if monster is literally, that's its keyword, is what if, what if, what if. And it's more of an anxious feeling than a personal attack. So they're different in my body. And that's the thing with reparenting and parts work, is that it's honestly different for each person. And there's not really a right or a wrong. So when I'm talking about these things, just because I handle it one way doesn't mean that that's what your body needs. And that's part of what I love about it, is that you get to truly honor you and your needs. So,
Yeah. So is it something that, would you just say that this is, once you start this, it becomes almost like a lifelong tool that you continue to use?
so far, that's my experience.
Okay. There's not
I
like a magic graduation that happens at some point.
I don't think so, because to
Yeah.
me, this is a practice the way that meditation is a practice or journaling is a practice. It is one of my healing practices. And it doesn't have to be every single day. It doesn't have to be every single week. I think it's helpful to tap into your parts and let them know, like, hey, I still know you're there, particularly your inner child. Mine, at least, wants to know that she's remembered and I haven't forgotten her. And so when I'm going on a hike or doing something like playful to me, I might just put my hand on my heart and be like, you see this? Right? Like, I'm like, I remember you. I'm bringing you along with me intentionally. So in that way, it is consistent. But typically, as far as like sitting down and like mapping it out and talking to individual parts, that happens when I get dysregulated. So it's like the more intense work is when it's needed. And then the like lighter, gentle connection, I see you, I hear you, that kind of loving work is maybe more joy led, right? That stuff that just feels good. That's more of a daily practice.
Okay. So what would be, can you just quickly tell me, like, what do you think are probably two of the most like common unmet needs that you see in your practice?
I would say the first one, these aren't really in order, but the first one is a need for safety. And I have a whole course on this because safety comes in many forms. There is physical safety, which everybody kind of understands, and that's usually where we stop thinking about it. But there's also emotional safety, there's relational safety, there is mental safety, which is like why we do the work to stop our inner critic from berating us, because that's not a very safe feeling. If you are constantly telling yourself that you suck, that does not feel very safe mentally, right? And there's spiritual safety. And sometimes we can't change certain things. We can't necessarily change, that we lost a job and we're struggling with money. So in that event, that physical safety or mental safety, because that kind of plays into both, might be under threat. Then how do I add to that other forms of safety so I find a little bit of balance? Do I lean into my friendships? Do I spend more time in spiritual practice? Do I do some of this reparenting work so I'm not sitting here berating myself with this inner critic voice? I am turning that inner critic voice into an advisor going, hey, I know you're exhausted and I still need you to go and put in some applications today. If I can soften the load elsewhere, it's easier to face the unsafety in the things I can't change. So safety would be the first one. And then the second one, I believe, is really, it's a combination of three things, but it all has the same feeling, if you will. It is being seen, being heard, and being understood. So it's this, like, I don't know, whatever that I'm doing with my hands comes together. And so when I'm working with any part, that's my first goal. I see you. I hear your concerns. I understand that you are trying to help. I can even see why this strategy was developed in an attempt to help, right? That's first. And from there, we can start to tweak strategy. We can start to, open up perspective. But it's the same thing I do in coaching, right? I can see where this child is coming from. I can see where this parent is coming from. And if they can feel seen and understood and heard, everything softens. Then they can receive perspective or coaching or ideas or whatever. But that being seen is part of safety. There are 4 S's that create secure attachment. According to Doctors Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Bryson, they wrote The Power of Showing Up, where they condense these into 4 main things. Seen, safe, seen, soothe, secure is their 4 S's. Secure is really created by the first 3. So it's safe, seen, soothed. And in my experience, a lot of the soothing, it's not soothing the way people think of soothing. It is not making the feelings go away. It is being in it with. So if my child's really sad, I don't have to make her stop being sad. I can be with her. Like, yeah, this is what really sad feels like. It's a lot. It's heavy. It's hard. And you're learning how to feel really sad. And I'm not going to go anywhere. I believe you that this is really sad. And I believe in you that you can feel hard things and be okay. I'm not panicked. I'm not overwhelmed. You can rely on my regulated nervous system, even though yours is dysregulated. And by being in my body and being with these feelings, whatever they look like, you learn, oh, I can do sad. I can do that. I can do grief. I can do anger. I can do hard. I can do these things because I've learned how, because I've done it in the presence of somebody who is safe. Right? So the safety and the seeing creates really the soothing and the security. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Safe and seen.
Yeah. No, it does make so much sense. And I just think about the being seen part of it and feeling safe to be seen. I was a whole thing I was having when I started doing this. Like, there was part of me that desperately was like, I want to get to a place where I want my, I know I have things I want to share. And at the other side of me was like, but it doesn't feel safe to be seen.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, because no one's seen me, I must not be bringing enough value to be seen. And so it was like this like loop of like,
right.
Manifesting. I was like, oh, okay. So hearing you talk about, creating that safety in different ways and leaning into other areas also seems super logical and helpful. So I am totally going to be reading your book because I have not read it yet, but I will be.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So I asked you about that. And then I just wanted to say, have you ever noticed this affecting people's health? Like when they've started to do this work, has it changed anything that they've maybe been struggling with? I can see how this might be something that a byproduct of doing some of this work might ease some health frustrations people have.
Absolutely. In a couple ways. And actually, in maybe one unexpected way. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. And I think that was my experience because I was so used to not listening to my body at all and just pushing through and doing what I had to do and going through my checklist and always keeping myself super busy and distracted, that when I started to really turn inward, I actually really started noticing things that had probably been a problem for always. But it was like, oh, you're here now? Like it was a lot. And so I respect when people need to titrate, when they need to do just a tiny bit at a time. I respect that. I don't judge that. I'm not somebody that's going to push you to do more than you're ready to or comfortable doing. But one thing that I do think is I've seen sleep significantly improve. And when your sleep improves, everything improves. Muscle tension and tightness, even like digestion can improve because a lot of us hold anxiety in our body and we don't know it's anxiety. And so we're like me, a lot of us is me. We're eating to quell this kind of like uncomfortable, nauseous feeling, but it's not a hunger. It's like an emotional feeling, and we don't recognize it as such. So we're just trying to push it down again and again and again. And like biologically, a full stomach presses on your vagus nerve, which is soothing. So there's multiple components. Plus there's dopamine receptors in your mouth, and there is proprioceptive sensors in your jaw. So chewing on things, crunchy things in particular, provides a sensory soothing component. So everything is strategy, right? Our brains and our bodies are trying to strategize and trying to be safe and trying to heal and trying to cope. And when we stop judging things as bad habits, and I'm sure there's exceptions to everything, but I really try to stop judging things as bad habits and look at what function is this serving? And is there another option that would serve a similar function and have less negative side effects? Right? And this is what I do with children. My 2-year-old's biting. Well, 2-year-olds learn about the world with their teeth and their face and their mouth and their hands. They're little animals, like actually, and they learn about the whole world like this. So if they need to bite, this isn't just about stopping them from biting. It's about understanding those proprioceptive sensors. It's about understanding they have no impulse control because that part of their brain is not developed. And it's giving them what they can bite. What can you bite safely to get that release, that like, oh, all that tension is out of my body, right? And you start there, and then you give them a step that's right next to it. Can you grrr instead of biting? And then you move slowly towards that regulated adult, like, man, I'm feeling frustrated response. But you don't jump to that.
Yeah.
Right? There's such a large in between. And so I do that with children, and I do that with us as adults who are using all of these different coping strategies. What is something else that also provides relief and meets some more needs and isn't necessarily interfering, right? It provides relief to me to scroll on my phone and get my dopamine fix, but it impacts my sleep. So what else can give me dopamine that isn't harming my sleep? Reading romance novels on my Kindle, right? They're kind of like candy books. Like, I don't have to think that hard. They're relaxing. They're dopamine filled, but they are not going to keep me up till 3 a.m. And that's just for me. That doesn't have to be for anybody else. But it's that kind of thing when you take the shame out of it, instead of just stop, it is, what purpose is this serving? How else can I meet this need in a way that meets other needs too and doesn't cause harm? And that kind of dance it becomes this practice of really honoring yourself.
So that's perfect lead in. We had talked a different time just on the phone, and you were sharing how often you help people see that there's often benefits that come from these old coping skills that we developed.
Yeah.
That there doesn't have to be shame or self-judgment around. And so when you were talking about how like codependency was a coping skill for you, and how it led you into being really perceptive. And so can you just talk really quickly
Yeah.
like how there are benefits, like we don't need to judge all of these
Yeah,
that we've been using?
Yes. So the codependency is a great example because it gets a really bad rap. I don't fully understand why. And I actually didn't really know that it did until years after I learned about it. But I learned about codependency and I was like, oh, wow, I'm really, really codependent. And I had no idea. Like, that was my frame of the world. And that was how I expected people to be, which is part of the codependency. If I'm that way, then you should be that way. But part of what it did, that like ownership of other people's feelings and other people's experiences, is it made me highly perceptive to other people's emotional worlds. It made me very good at reading people, and it made me a chameleon, right? And like on the negative, I can contort myself into whatever you need me to be, which is very inauthentic to who I am. And that was hard. But it also allowed me to have any job and excel at it. Also, the ADHD helped that. It allowed me to meet with people from like all different backgrounds, like wildly different levels of every kind of spectrum. And talk to them and relate to them person to person. Find a thing that we can relate on, because it won't be everything, but like I can find my way to that thing, and then we can sit and have a conversation. And those skills have value and have benefit. Pulling it back away from codependency is how it is the introduction of boundaries, right? It is not those. My job isn't to make you comfortable at the cost of my comfort, right? I started there because who cares about me? But I learned I have the skill to know what you want me to be. And I have the choice to say no if I need to. And that brought balance. I didn't discard everything that I ever learned in being codependent, but I learned how to bring balance to it.
Yeah, and I think when you get that awareness, and then as soon as you realize, I feel like this is something I talk about a lot, is that as soon as you realize that in every moment we have a choice, whether it's the meaning we assign to something, it's how we choose to respond to something, the words we use, the feelings we want to feel, like that in itself, that we have choice at all does give us power. And
Yes.
that we're way more powerful than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
So I love that you choose to also see the skills and the benefits that came out of that tool. And I think a lot of us, as you said earlier, our brains are wired to look for the negative
Mm-hmm.
out of survival. But when we can take some time to like really go in and like have some gratitude for like that little us that developed these skills and came through it, and like what are the benefits that came of those, like what did it make me good at. And it's powerful to take time to like kind of pat yourself on the back and recognize some of the good that's come out of some of your struggles or things that you perceived previously
Yeah.
bad tools or habits.
Absolutely. And it reminds me, I want to say this, like we in the healing community, we tend to look forward at like what's left to heal and where else can we heal and what else can we do? And we look that direction. And just every once in a while, I encourage you to look back and go, I have come so damn far. Holy
Yes.
crap.
Yes.
Like, I think that's a really important part of this.
I do too. Yeah, I don't think that's part of like at the end of the year, I do these visioning for the next year experiences. And one of the things that we do in that experience is taking time, quiet time where, it's so hard for us to make that time to sit and like look at the experiences and the accomplishments and the things you learned, like taking conscious time to go, oh, okay, but we don't dwell and hang out looking back there because then we'll never get forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
But definitely that I think there is a benefit to checking your mirrors. You gotta check your mirrors once in a while.
Yeah.
So that So I love that. So what do you think are some gifts that this practice and doing this with clients has brought you?
That's a great question. I think that I have experienced a flexibility in my thinking that I didn't have before. And I think that having the ability to take what I used to categorize as all bad and again, just bring balance to it. I don't have to, and I will never tell somebody like, you should be grateful for your trauma. Like that is unconscionable to me. I would never try to project that onto somebody else. And I get overwhelmed staying in sad, heavy, dark. Like I don't want to do that. So this allows me a path to go, okay, the sad, heavy, dark exists. And there's something maybe positive or uplifting or hopeful within that same context.
Or even wisdom gained, even if it doesn't feel positive and hopeful, you may have learned or gained some sort of knowledge.
Yeah. And I don't think sometimes people will translate that to be like, oh, well, this had to happen to me or I wouldn't be who I am. That's not my take. My take is I am who I am. And because of that, I have taken these things and alchemized them, right? I could have still been a helpful, loving human being without being traumatized. Like I genuinely believe that. And that was my experience. So I am choosing to use my experience to be a safe place for people who otherwise wouldn't have a safe place. And I teach them how to be their own safe place. And in doing that, I am making the world itself less likely to continue to traumatize children, right? Which is this gift back to myself, right? It's like, that's my happy ending. I have these memories and these stories where I'm like, man, that just sucks. There's not really a bright side to that. And yet that girl became this woman who is determined to keep pouring love and light and hope into the world. I like her.
This leads me to my favorite question I ask everybody, and that is, what is your personal definition of joy? Because it might be tied to this.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
My personal definition of joy. Goodness, there's, let's see. I think that being in alignment with my values, bringing light to experiences, to the world, and it can shift, right? So joy can be cuddling with my kids. It can be gardening. It can be learning something new. It can be going on an adventure. It certainly is meeting new friends. But it's the feeling of being in alignment with my values. And I think that was a hard one thing to even know who I was, because I spent so much of my early years just pretzeling myself into what people needed me or wanted me to be. And so by becoming me and allowing me to be me, and then every time that I feel like deeply aligned with who that is, that feels like joy to me.
I love it. I love it. That is amazing, because everybody has such a different definition. So I love to ask that. So if someone wants to start this and they want resources, just let us know, like, what are some good resources? Tell us about tools that you offer, or or point people to, and like, also just tell us also what you're like currently working on or want to share with the world that you want us to know about.
Yeah. So my website is shareparenting.com, and my Instagram is at shareparenting. I also have at Reparenting Realm, but you can get to that from at shareparenting, because that's a brand new podcast. I have a YouTube channel as well, which is also called Share Parenting. Everything is Share Parenting. Facebook, all of the things. I have resources on my website as well. And I think that there's so many ways to find yourself in a place where you can begin healing. And I want to touch back to that piece of alignment. Like, what is your soul calling out for? And sometimes it seems like that can't be the right answer. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about propagating plants. But for her right now, she feels really stuck. And she described it as holding all of these broken pieces and not sure how to put them back together. And what came to my mind was, okay, but what if you're not supposed to? What if you are growing something new? And it's not about all the old pieces and putting them back together. And so that's what led us to talking about taking some time to be with plants, because especially right now in the spring, I literally pinched off the top of the basil and put it in water, and it grew roots. And then I put it in soil and it grew a new plant. Like, the fact that the world mirrors this ability for us to grow and learn and stretch and create is phenomenal to me. And so I guess that's a weird answer to your question. My point is that there's resources literally everywhere. Anywhere that calls to your soul, follow it. See what happens. Get so curious. I loved the Powered by Joy podcast because it speaks to that inner voice of like follow your heart, let yourself open up and do things that light you up on the inside. And there's so many ways to do it. And when you and I talked the very first time, you said like healing doesn't always have to be so hard and heavy. And I'm like, I felt like this relief, like, oh yeah, that's right. Like I can go on a adult play date. I can go to hot springs. I can go play and have fun. That is a great resource. It really, truly is.
Yeah.
And yes, there's lots of books. I think I've mentioned like 4 or 5 of them this podcast.
I've written a whole bunch of notes over here.
Right. But I do
have all of that in the show notes. I'll
okay,
make a list, website, books, all of that.
And I do have a group coaching that's available, which I highly recommend. We have 12 calls every month that you can attend, whichever ones work for your schedule. There's a workbook. There's actual coaching with me every call. I know that that's been a thing that has not always been the case for some groups, but I am actually there on every call. And in that space, we can talk about parenting. We can talk about childhood. We can talk about reparenting. We can talk about all of those things. It is really a space and community for people who are on their own healing journey. And it's just been such an incredible experience to surround yourself with other people who have those similar goals and values and want to uplift you. I think that's one of my favorite things about that.
Yeah. And just to clarify, this is for people who have children of all ages or even before.
Yep. Even before, if you're like, I would like to heal some of this before I have kids, you are my hero.
Yeah. Now, or even if you have adult kids and you're like, okay, you got grandparent kids coming along and you're like, this is another opportunity to show up differently.
Yes.
But for me is like, as I'm having more grandkids, like trying to reflect back and go, okay, this is my opportunity to show up differently because I didn't have as many skills while I was raising them, have to own that and, make repairs here and there. And, but, so I think even as a grandparent, especially like this, it can be a really useful tool because there's a lot of us that did not get tools and and they're out there now. So we can show up differently as grandparents.
That has been one of my most surprising and like heartwarming type of client is grandmothers that are like, hey, I am actually open. I want to learn and understand. And like, I have questions. Like, this isn't how we did it. And I have no problem with that. Please ask questions. Like, that's beautiful. That's how we learn. That's how we receive the challenge in our own mind and we answer it. It's that what if, right? It's okay, no big deal. Let's answer those questions. But I have grandmas sometimes join I have a free Facebook group. I don't think I mentioned that. It's called Empowering Parents to Uplift Kids. And I will have grandparents join and they're like, especially when the children are neurodivergent, I think it really calls the grandparent to think in a different way. I have neurodivergent children. I'm neurodivergent. I work with a ton of neurodivergent families. And it is one of the most incredibly beautiful things I have gotten to witness is grandparents willing to go, I mean, I could learn something new. It's my favorite. It's my favorite.
Yeah. Well, we never get too old to learn and rewire, the brain. Yeah. So I love that. Okay. Well, we will put all of the resources. There were a ton. So we'll just put in all the resources in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for giving me this time and sharing your knowledge. And like, I feel like this is my own little private session of ahas for myself too. So I have so many notes for myself. So I love that. So just thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for bringing me on and letting me talk about something I love so much and so near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure we will be talking again.
Yes, we will, because I will have you on my podcast.
Yeah.
Both of them. Because you are brilliant and I absolutely love having these conversations with you.
This is my favorite kind of thing, sharing the knowledge.
Yes.
It's very helpful. This is how we get better.
Yes, together.
Yep, definitely. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Erica.
Yeah, thank you, Sami.